Carter Yakemchuk might not be the best defenseman prospect in this draft, but if you're looking for sheer entertainment value, I'm not sure there's a more fun prospect available. In his draft year for the Calgary Hitmen, Yakemchuk was just constantly doing things. Dangling through defenses, delivering crushing hits, unleashing bombs from the point. And yeah, sometimes committing bad penalties, coughing up pucks, and completely losing his man in coverage. That happened too sometimes. No defenseman in the WHL finished with more goals than Carter Yakemchuk. Only 4 players in the WHL finished with more penalty minutes than Carter Yakemchuk. And if there's any better way to sum up Carter Yakemchuk, it's in those 2 stats. But now let's get into the weeds of what makes Carter Yakemchuk such an intriguing prospect for the 2024 NHL Draft. We'll start with his biggest strength, his puck skills. Yakemchuk truly, for a defenseman especially, has ridiculous puck handling ability, especially for a player his size. He's 6'3". He's a big guy. Yakemchuk loves to dangle through and around and all over the place. He's constantly trying to weave in and out of defenses. He loves to activate. He loves to make plays with the puck. And why wouldn't you when you're that good at beating defensemen and opposing forwards one-on-one? Yakemchuk also has an absolute bomb of a shot. You don't luck into 31 goals, which is what he scored for Calgary this year. He can absolutely rip it. We're talking about a guy who is truly a well-rounded offensive weapon from the back end. And as for Yakemchuk's play without the puck, he's not one of those big defensemen who'd rather use his reach and his technique to try to force turnovers rather than getting his hands dirty. No, Yakemchuk loves delivering big open ice hits, heavy checks, battling in the corners, cross-checking in front of the net. He has that nastiness, that meanness to his game that NHL scouts, NHL coaches absolutely love. And a lot of fans love it too. Also, Yakemchuk isn't a slug skating-wise either. He can really fly once he gets going. His top-end gear is legitimately good. And when you look at that combination of size, skill, nastiness, skating potential, Yakemchuk's plausible upside is legitimately through the roof, and it's what makes him such an exciting prospect. But that's not to say there aren't concerns, that there aren't weaknesses in Yakemchuk's game. There are quite a few of them, especially at this stage. First off, Yakemchuk's defensive play needs a lot of work. His reads and coverage often can be slow. His gaps in rush coverage are loose way too often, and he can take himself out of the play at times looking for big hits. Look, Yakemchuk's defensive play, from what I saw and what I've read from scouts, it did improve as the season progressed. But he still needs to put in a lot of work to not be a liability in that area at the NHL level. He's not a finished product. Then there's the penalties. Despite the fact that apparently he's a pretty quiet, unassuming guy off the ice, he can go over the edge quite a lot when he's on the ice. Just like he didn't get those 31 goals by accident, those 120 penalty minutes were well earned too. He'll need to learn to dial it back at times. Obviously, teams aren't going to want him to stop being mean, stop being nasty, stop being intimidating, but they are going to want him to stop putting the team in bad situations by ending up in the box in key situations. Then there's the skating. Look, Yakemchuk's top-end gear is strong, but the acceleration definitely needs some work. The footwork is a bit choppy, and mechanically as a skater, while he does seem to be improving and cleaning some things up, it's not yet the best, and it definitely has holes. Finally, there are questions about Yakemchuk's hockey IQ. Now, we already talked a little bit about the defensive zone issues, but also he's not the best at engineering breakouts when under forechecking pressure. He passes the puck pretty well given time and space, but when he's under attack, he can freeze, he can panic. And those are the types of things you worry aren't necessarily easily fixable, especially when you get to the NHL level when the forechecks are only even more fierce. Finally, there's one other concern, which is a little bit more nebulous, but still pretty important. Most scouts do view Yakemchuk as something of a raw player, a guy who's going to need time to develop into what he's ultimately going to become. But he is old for his draft year. He was born in September, and usually guys who are old for their draft year, they don't tend to have the kind of upside that guys who are young for their draft year do. It's a legitimate concern that all that exciting upside that people think they see in Yakemchuk, it's more an older player taking advantage of being more physically developed than his peers. Still, for me at least, the upside of Carter Yakemchuk is very, very real. Look, you can't just wave away the defensive lapses, the skating concerns, the lack of discipline. But he did show signs this season of making progress in all of those areas, and there are just so many unique strengths to his game. Yakemchuk is your classic high ceiling, low floor prospect. If he hits, it wouldn't shock me if he ends up being a do-it-all number one defenseman who drives play and is basically a better skating Evan Bouchard. But if this is just who he is, if none of his weaknesses get addressed, if he doesn't improve in any of those concerning areas, he could end up being capable of not taking anything more than sheltered third pair minutes at the NHL level. Both scenarios are possible. Both outcomes are possible. I personally lean a little bit more towards the optimistic side, but the concerns are real, which is why he's a risky prospect, but a high reward prospect.
We all silly like the mayor.